broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's WilmsFront Snapshot news show, coming to you on this Tuesday, the 9th of June 2026. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube channel. Hello to everyone watching. It is 8:30 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria. This will probably be the permanent start time. I'm just so busy these days, but it's excited busy. I'm doing a lot of exciting things at the moment, so it's a good thing that I've just got so much on. We begin tonight with the attempted cancellation of my most recent WilmsFront guest, comedian Lisa Jane Spencer, who she had already done a couple of sketches about transitioning to be an Indian, and she included Indian stereotypes of throwing rubbish out on the street and simulating about to poo outside. Obviously, in India, there's a lot of rubbish everywhere. How does it get there? And it has been noted that there are many people who shit in the streets. Of course, that's not to imply or allege that all Indians do that. Now, last week she did one on transitioning to be an Aboriginal, which obviously there's a lot of light-skinned Australians who suddenly discover that they're Aboriginal. So she did a sketch where she was dressed up in animal skins and had fake face paint and performed a Aboriginal dance. And the ending, which was the trigger for the left's vitriolic campaign against her, saw her simulate petrol sniffing from a jerry can, which you can see to my right here. That was the clip the sketch has now been deleted twice from Instagram. The first time because SBS complained about their logo, because it had their logo and insight mocking these SBS segments, and so she changed it to special woke service, but that was also removed for hate speech. Now, the next day she was fired from her job at Peninsula Hot Springs after leftists doxed and contacted / harassed the business, and they immediately caved and released this statement on social media. So I know it's little writing there on the screen there, but I've got a larger version which I'll read out here. So they say Peninsula Hot Springs is aware of concerns that have been raised regarding social media content circulating online about a former employee. We want to acknowledge and sincerely recognize the concern and disappointment that has been expressed, particularly by members of First Nations communities, community partners, and those who have reached out to us directly. We do not support or endorse content that is inconsistent with our values or commitment to inclusion, respect, and cultural safety. For more than 2 decades, Peninsula Hot Springs has been privileged to build meaningful relationships with First Nations people, artists, cultural practitioners, team members, and community partners. These relationships have helped shape our journey and continue to influence how we learn, grow, operate as an organisation. We hold the deepest respect for these communities and remain committed to fostering a culturally safe, inclusive, and welcoming environment for all. So, as you can see there, the corporate woke, DEI, is not dead in Australia. Now, they say former. They fired her that morning, and it is now illegal to dox someone where they work under the Privacy and Other Legislation Amendment Act 2024, which introduced a specific Commonwealth offence for doxing, which is now in effect. So it's using a carriage service, social media, email, for example, and can include telephone, to publish or distribute personal information in a way that is reasonable people would see as menacing, harassing towards an individual. Maximum penalty 6 years in prison. Did the lefties ever think about that? And because the Peninsula Hot Springs, now I've never been, and I don't intend to ever go to Peninsula Hot Springs. It's because they basically caved to the mob, pardon the pun. They have opened themselves up to an unfair dismissal claim. Now, this is what, going back to Lisa's post here on Instagram. So she rightly points out that they say they're inclusive of all people. This is completely incorrect. They cater to more certain types of people than others. I will be seeking legal advice. I imagine if the shoe were on the other foot and I was a left-wing person making jokes about white people, which I've done, would they have fired me? Haha, we all know that they wouldn't have. And now, there have been unfair dismissal precedents, such as Antoinette Lattouf, who was fired from her fill-in presenter role on ABC Radio Sydney because of pro-Palestine content that she posted on her own social media. She took the ABC to the federal court and won. Then there was also Shane Turner, who worked for one of the woke inner city councils as a rubbish collector. I can't remember if it was Moreland or Darabin, and they're both as woke as each other, because he didn't want to take part in a Welcome to Country. They disciplined and then sacked him. He won that case. So Peninsula Hot Springs, they could be in hot water because of this rash decision. Now, addressing the substance of her sketch. So obviously it's taking to the absurd Aboriginal self-identification. So it's trying to get people talking about this uncomfortable social and health problem that has plagued many Aboriginal communities, petrol sniffing. There's that Don't Be a Rama Rama song. You don't sniff petrol from a can, you put your petrol in your car instead. Don't be Rama Rama, it's messing with your brains. And British Petroleum invented a new petrol called Opal, which is unsniffable. Now, our cultural institutions, through the Welcome to Countries, smoking ceremonies and dances, they want to portray Aboriginal culture as this Dreamtime paradise without mentioning the violence and substance abuse. Now, fans of Lisa and dark comedy have began donating to a Give, Send, Go that was set up for her, which I will put a link into the live chat here. So as you can see, that it had original fundraising goal of 10,000 and has raised 48,000. So the description says that Lisa was brutally harassed and bullied. And this is a sort of woke cancel culture mob have said about Lisa is disgusting and untrue. Lisa relied on her job to survive, and I think it's important we rally behind Lisa, demonstrate that free expression and good comedy cannot simply cancelled because of the far left. Australia should support each other in the face of this bullying. So the money will go to, well, so she can hopefully do comedy as a full-time career, and also legal fees as well. And now the far left and they won the initial battle by getting Lisa fired, but they are losing the war. They are particularly angry that there's been so many ha-ha reacts to mainstream media articles describing Lisa's sketch, and they're particularly mad about the fundraiser, that it's raised so much money. They claim that she's not a proper comedian, and that comedians are not supposed to punch down. Lisa did a previous video about this. So they're basically saying that comedy should now be intersectional, and that that only groups that have significant privilege, okay, white people, are okay to make fun of. And they've also said that her comedy her attempts at comedy were racist and lazy. And I saw one person say, "Oh, because there's real comedians, they do stand up, not sketches. You got a license for that comedy, mate?" Anyone can describe themselves as a comedian, just like anyone to describe themselves as a journalist, because it's the freedom of the press, freedom of expression. There shouldn't be some gatekeeping or licensing. Now, it's also interesting that the pro-Zionist Israel activists, they don't have they're not that concerned about Lisa being doxxed and losing their job, because they don't like Lisa's other views, particularly on the Bondi massacre. Obviously, she went viral last month about questioning Malcolm Roberts, asking him if Bondi was a false flag. And the leader of these attacks on Lisa have been led by Claire Lehman's right-hand thought over at Quillette, Zoe Booth. So she put out a post first saying that, it wasn't funny, and then calling Lisa retarded. That's not very politically correct to use the R word to describe Lisa's views. And she tried to claim that there was a difference between Bill Leak's cartoon about Aboriginal drinking, alcohol abuse, and parental neglect, which saw him smeared as a racist, and then Race Discrimination Commissioner Tim Supomasani urged complaints to the Human Rights Commission. So Zoe claimed that Bill Leak's cartoon was an example of a controversial critique of some of the problems in Aboriginal culture, done in a more thought-provoking manner, where, in my opinion, the suffering wasn't the butt of the joke. Good artists, intelligent people can be controversial and offensive while getting us to think. The joke isn't about Aboriginal people are bad or bad parents. The joke is that the policy is silly. I'm not sure what policy she's referring to, because in order for it to work, parents need to be present and active in their kids' life. The joke laughs at the policy. Again, what policy is she referring to? She needs to be more specific, not at the suffering. The cartoon makes you think and reconsider a serious issue, and that's what makes it good art. So the only reason I can think that she believes that Bill Leake's cartoon was acceptable and that Lisa's sketch wasn't acceptable is because Bill Leake was she would consider him one of her class, because Quillette, it's one of the most prominent intellectual dark web wanker websites, and The Australian is who Bill Leake worked for, and Claire Lehman is also a contributor at The Australian. Now, the intellectual dark web, they've never liked a alt-right, or what do they call it, the woke right, or what is it, woke right now humor. And she also tried to compare Lisa's sketch to jokes about Holocaust denial, trying to lump it in with different types of what you'd call sort of edgy online statements, like, for example, Nick Fuentes' cookie super chat. So obviously, they've long sneered these intellectual dark web people that they claim that they're having real, honest conversations, but don't talk about that. That is very bad, and they don't like they don't like Tucker Carlson's long time interviews. Now, I rather listen to a 2-hour Tucker Carlson interview than listen to a Quillette podcast with Claire and Zoe. I'd rather do heaps of other things than listen to that podcast. And what they basically are, now Zoe claims that she's not right-wing or conservative. What they really want to do is they want to replace the current elite with themselves, and they want to be the new gatekeepers, thought controllers. They are still elites. They have no connection to ordinary working people. I keep getting ads for their conference, the Intellectual Dark Web's conference, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, or the ARC. What's the citizenship of what? Global citizenship? Again, they like to talk about in the collective Western civilization. So they're not even they're not even really. A lot of the time they talk in the collective, not really in the individual. And of course, other parts of the intellectual dark web are trigonometry, Douglas Murray, The Spectator, Spiked Online. Again, a lot of them don't do any much street reporting. Katie Hopkins refers to them as studio boys, and you will remember that they tried to cancel Katie Hopkins again because of her joke the week after Derek Draper died, that Kate Garraway's widow was going to release another documentary about his long COVID life after Derek, and she laughed hysterically. And Piers Morgan called her despicable, and Andrew Gold of that Heretics very tut-tutted her when Katie Hopkins went on his podcast when mentioning that, and she still laughed about, as she calls, the dead Derek. Now, of course, you remember the cancellation of Marty Sheargold because of his joke, which didn't land. Like, jokes, like, if a joke doesn't land and it just comes across bad, It shouldn't be a hanging offence. So Marty Sheargold made the joke that he'd rather put a nail in his penis than watch women's sports, and I made the joke that women complain too much and that endometriosis doesn't exist. Now, again, he doesn't really think that. Just like Lisa doesn't think that all Aboriginals are petrol sniffers, just like Bill Leake with his cartoon wasn't saying that all Aboriginal parents are too drunk to look after their children. And of course, they're the gold standard of female comedy, Joan Rivers. She at the start of her stand-ups later in her career did a disclaimer where she just said, "Lighten the fuck up. These are just jokes, you assholes." And she also refused to apologize for jokes, even the most controversial one on Fashion Police, when she was commenting on Heidi Klum's dress, and she said the last time a German looked that hot, they were throwing Jews in the oven. Now, of course, there was probably the ADL was outraged, but Joan Rivers refused to apologize. She said it got people thinking about the Holocaust. Like, you make a joke and it gets people thinking. And obviously, Joan Rivers was Jewish herself. Rivers wasn't her real name. And I remember a joke that she made when a TMZ reporter asked her, or was baiting her, "What do you think about Snooki from the Jersey Shore getting pregnant?" And her response was, "Even Rick Tansorum said abortion." I thought that was funny. Obviously, I'm a pro-lifer, and Joan Rivers doesn't actually mean that. She's not. She doesn't actually didn't want Snooki to abort her child. But the joke is that she thinks that the Jersey Shore personalities are so trash that she doesn't want them reproducing. But I thought that was funny there, and they're throwing Rick Santorum in as the punchline, who's as pro-life as me. I thought that was humorous as well. And obviously, there's one of the most funniest Australian sitcoms is Fat Pizza, which is full of racial stereotypes. Rocky and Bib, Middle Eastern drug dealers. And there is Kev the Kiwi, the alcoholic Maori. And there was also the way that they wrote out Andu's character, Chong Fat. He's convicted of eating the police dog. Obviously, the stereotype there about Asians eating dogs, and then he gets raped in prison by Dave O'Dinkham's dad, Daryl, in the police cell. Now, obviously, I think for balance, they introduced Dave O'Dinkham as the bogan bonghead who later gets fired and is on from Fat Pizza and is on Centrelink. And these are just the Fat Pizza characters off the top of my head. There was the Muslim character who had 3 wives. And now the cancel culture people have doxed the identity of TSIM member who went by the stage name Ron Hitler Barassi. He's had that name. I'm not really a fan of the band, but the speculation for years they were prominent musicians who wore the balaclava mask. So now retrospectively he's being smeared as an anti-Semite, and now they're trying to get him fired from his day job. Andy Nolch says, "Yeah, the Lisa video was funny, but I was surprised how upset the left got. Like, they are so sensitive." It got up to 2 million views on Instagram before they deleted. And it had thousands of comments. Dawn says, "We have to be true to ourselves. Get fired, make a GoFundMe, well, give, send, go, get reparations." I'm liking this.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, our next topic. I'm not sure if anyone in Melbourne saw the billboards of the Wicked Witch of Bendigo East, urging Victorians to ditch the witch in this year's Victorian election in November. Premier for how much longer? Jacinta Allan. She took to social media to express her folks' outrage about the billboards, to distract about what a shit job she is doing in overseeing all the crime and corruption. So she said, sexism just has no place in our political debate, full stop. A billboard truck using sexist language has been driving around Melbourne as part of a secret and well-funded political campaign. People are entitled to disagree with me. That's democracy. But I care that this attacks women, and I care about who's next. The political debate in this country has become corrosive over the past few years, so much so that behaviour which will watch me condemned is now just another part of life. Media don't call it out. They report on like it's fair game, like it's normal, but nothing about this is normal. If you don't take a stand against this creeping culture as a tendency of taking over, you only have to look at America to know that. I cannot stand back and let Victoria become a place where this sort of language is fair game against any woman at work or any woman in leadership. If we don't draw a line, this line will keep moving. At the end of the day, I just want my kids to grow up knowing that women deserve the same respect. I want girls to know that they should never have to aim lower just to feel safer. I want boys to know that they don't have to put women in their place to make their own way in the world. Sexism hurts everyone. If the media won't call it out, I will. And of course, this is not the first time she's played the gender card. She said that Mark Knight's cartoon of Melbourne Fashion Week, which had her on the catwalk nude, referencing the emperor having no clothes. Obviously, it had her bits blurred out. She said this was sexist, even though Mark Knight, he drew Dan Andrews in naked when he mocked Dan Andrews' fascination with COVID zero donut days by having him as the Nirvana baby, which is obviously on that album cover, Nevermind is naked. And so had him chasing the zero, and obviously the small penis was blurred out. And of course, we called Dan Andrews much worse. Obviously, there was that song by Senator Taking the Piss, Dan Andrews is a fucking cunt. Part of democracy is being able to mock and disparage political leaders. And obviously, when Dan Andrews locked us down and was arresting people for incitement, that's about all we could do, just endlessly mock him and his goons. Now, I heard James Campbell, the political editor at the Herald Sun, say that they're using witch because they can't use, he was implying the B word, which is bitch. But if you said ditch the bitch, then you couldn't put Jacinta Allan in a witch's hat. I mean, obviously, that's part of the visual to have her in a hat there. And you'll remember that there was in her outside her Bendigo electorate office, there was the shit premier disposal bin mocking her machete bins, which seemed to have worked well. I mean, there was only about 5 or 6 youths arrested wielding machetes at Flinders Street Station on Saturday evening. Thankfully, I didn't decide to go into the city that evening, because that would have been quite shocking there. Now, for those of you who may remember, Ditch the Witch signs first appeared at anti-carbon tax rallies in 2011 about Julia Gillard, and she used the gender card as her prime ministership became massively unpopular, and so she decided to release a statement as well. So she said, I should do my Gillard voice. I am disgusted to see the slogan "Ditch the Witch" in Victoria aimed at the Premier Jacinta Allan. This was a slogan used against me as Prime Minister 15 years ago. It was roundly condemned then, and in the years since, my view is that things were slowly improving for women in politics. More women are leading. Sexism hasn't gone away, but it is less ferocious in the political mainstream, though social media continues to be a toxic sewer. I'm saddened to see that improvement cast aside and this tired old trope resurrected. I'm also angry. Whoever funded the billboards bearing these signs should be outed for what they are. Unimaginable, ugly, sexist. The billboard company should do the responsible thing and take these signs down immediately. Why should women and girls in Victoria be subjected to such visible misogyny? As a personal message to Premier Allan, she's actually spelt her name wrong. It's she spelt it A-double-L-E-N. It's the Scottish spelling of A-double-L-A-N. So who's proofreading Julia Gillard's statements? I know what it's like to be the subject of these kinds of attacks. My heartfelt best wishes to go to you and your family who understandably be distressed. I know you will inspire with your resilience. And now you also remember that Tony Abbott, he was viciously attacked for speaking at that rally, and there was that sign that said Julia Gillard, Bob Brown's bitch. Jacinta Allan, she's you would say that she's the CFMEU's bitch. Now, playing the gender card, it didn't work for Julia Gillard, and it's not working for Jacinta Allan. So this was the freshwater poll in the Herald Sun. So her approval rating is at -37, and it's kind of difficult for her to play the agenda card because the opposition leader is a woman, Jess Wilson, who has an approval rating of +15. Preferred Premier, Jess Wilson, 49%, Jacinta Allan, 25%. The Victorian West State election was held today. Labor's coming third in 23%. The Coalition is leading 27%. One Nation in second in 25%. So that's a two-party preferred of the Coalition, 53%, and Labor, 47%. And this is why there is this internal Labor talk that she could be replaced. Now, obviously, the Liberal Party, Jess Wilson, the Deputy Federal Liberal leader, Jane Hume, have condemned the billboards, still triggered by how it was weaponized against Tony Abbott. But that day, an actual popular female political leader, Pauline Hanson, was having none of Jacinta Allan's pearl clutching.
When the going gets tough, the tough gets going, and I am all in. I am absolutely determined to see this through.
Jacinta's doing a great job.
Is Jacinta the best person to lead Labor to this year's state election?
She absolutely is the best person not to lead Labor, to lead Victoria.
One Nation is taking a slice out of the Labor Party vote.
One Nation's leader is continuing to slice away at Jacinta Allan.
It's an absolute basket case down there. No wonder they call her a witch.
A reference to these digital ads doing laps of the city.
It's sexist, It's wrong, and I'm calling it out.
Also calling out this advice on how to handle the label.
Suck it up, sweetheart.
Pauline Hanson chooses to barrack for the bullies. I choose to fight them.
Jacinta Allan, she has been the cheerleader for bullies. The CFMEU, they are known for their bullying and misogyny. She obviously handed wasted so much taxpayer money on the big build to keep the CFMEU happy. And you should see just look up the text messages that John Setka sent his estranged wife. They were very charming. Now, the billboards have been paid for by Franco Pulo, the owner of the Gotham City brothel in South Melbourne, and has also been paid by other local businesses. Now, plenty of Victorians and Australians have laughed at this billboard, like they laughed at Lisa Jane Spencer's sketch, and they are really just everyone's over this sort of outrage generation and bad politicians, female leaders trying to hide behind sexism. Everyone's just over this shit. And there's actually, Franco Pulis has said that more Victorians had offered to donate to keep the billboards on the road. Now, obviously, the Premier, she was filmed door knocking to rally support in her electorate of Bendigo East. And maybe to get around to all the homes in the electorate, she'll need to fly by broomstick. I saw this on Bernie Finn's Facebook page, who's going to be a One Nation candidate. Jacinta Allan involved in high-speed crash. So everyone's just doubling down on the witch memes. And I saw a Retards Down Under. They put out a modified AI-generated billboard which said "punt the cunt," and then there was also one with Albo's face on it, saying "kick out the liar." Now. Jacinta Allan, maybe one of the things that she's trying to distract from is her newly promoted Minister for Youth, Luba Grigorovic, who admitted to regretting 6 of 33 character references she gave out, including for Muhammad Isa, a former Geelong taxi driver from Pakistan, convicted of multiple indecent assaults on women. She provided a reference for his 3rd citizenship attempt, describing him as showing deep respect for Australian laws and attesting to his good character. Thankfully, the Administrative Review Tribunal rejected that. And one of the other references that she gave was for a 38-year-old Pakistani citizen convicted of domestic violence. She provided a reference when he challenged a federal decision to revoke his visa for failing the character test. So now she says she won't give any character references, and our colleagues, she's only been promoted for factional reasons. She's a former union official for the rail ban and tram and a bus union, and a friend of John Setka, despite supporting to championing the working class. She's super rich. She doesn't live in her northwest electorate of Corowitz. She lives in a mansion in South Yarra with her rich husband, and they have a $30 million Portsea holiday house as well. Her colleagues clearly not wanting to defend her, saying they never give character references. It seems to be a bit of a in the past, Labor politicians have given dodgy character references. So, John Robertson, the New South Wales Labor opposition leader, resigned after he gave a character reference to Man Monis before he committed the Lint Cafe siege, asking him to be allowed to see his child on Father's Day. And Calvin Thompson, the previous Labor member for Wills, gave a character reference to Tony Mockbell when he was applying for a liquor licence. Now, because Labor's old political donation laws got knocked out by the High Court because they limited donations for all other parties and candidates, but Labor could get endless donations from the union movement, so they've passed new donation restrictions, I should call. So individual donations to political parties candidates are capped at $7,500 for a four-year parliamentary term. Foreign donations are banned, and anonymous donations of over $1,250 are prohibited. But the exception here is that affiliation fees and funding from trade unions as associated entity remain uncapped, but apparently they can't be used for political campaigning, can be used for administrative purposes, but that still frees up other donations to be directly used for campaigning. So there could be another High Court challenge, and of course there's more taxpayer funding for politicians elected. So $300,000, a bonus payment for a party's first MP elected, and a second MP $100,000, and third to 40th MP $55,000. So that goes towards administrative expenses. So basically, the waste and the rigging, gaming of our political system continues to favour the re-election of the Labor government, though it's looking quite grim for them at the moment. They won't be able to game their way out of this one, and if they ditched the witch as before the election and installed Ben Carroll, another one of Jacinta Allan's nicknames was Socialist Barbie, so I nicknamed Ben Carroll Ken. If you've seen the Barbie movie, Ken sneaks in the back of Barbie's driving to the real world. That's sort of what he did, sneaking in to the real world, and then he discovers patriarchy. So Ben Carroll is there to as Ken to reclaim the patriarchy.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, there was an awkward moment when Anthony Albanese and his New Zealand counterpart, Christopher Luxon, held their joint press conference after their annual Trans-Tasman Leaders meeting up in Noosa on the Sunshine Coast, so clearly escaping the Melbourne, Sydney and Canberra winter cold. Now, this question came about because of Christopher Luxon's finance minister, Nicola Willis, which is equivalent of their treasurer, urging Australians to move to New Zealand in the aftermath of the Albanese government's budget to increase the capital gains tax by removing the discount, changing it to indexation.
When the going gets
That we've seen
Australians looking to start or grow a business have an epic opportunity, and that opportunity is to do it in New Zealand. no capital gains tax, very simple tax system, broad base, low rate. We keep it simple. We allow you accelerated depreciation and deductibility on your capital investments. And you've got a government that is very pro-growth, anti-red tape. We're on a reforming mission to make this one of the best places in the world to do business. So my point would be, where the bloody hell are you? Come over.
I mean, we have a relationship which is often a bit tongue-in-cheek. That's the truth of the matter. The Wars sign our players. We have a few Kiwis in Australia too, 638,000 of them here in Australia. 1 in 8 New Zealanders live here. Why? Because it's a good place to live. Just like Australians will continue to enjoy living in New Zealand as well. And so it's a good relationship. Occasionally there's a bit of cheekiness to the relationship. Long may that continue.
Yeah. Look, no secret within the New Zealand domestic context, there's been a long-running debate now for over 10 years about the merits of introducing a CGT or not. You know, we haven't ever introduced one in the country. Her comments were really in the context of that debate domestically, rather than there was no comments about the domestic settings of the CGT here in Australia. That's up for you guys in your different economic context to obviously make your decisions. As it's a debate domestically in New Zealand, we don't think that's appropriate for New Zealand, and we feel pretty strongly about it. We've got a recovery underway, and we just think a CGT being introduced to New Zealand now would be a wrecking ball for our economy. Well, I think the Prime Minister discovered, I think it was done in good humour, and yes, it was cheeky, I agree. But what's important for me is that we don't comment on each other's domestic economic policies, because there's different contexts and different histories that may have got us to different decisions, and she definitely didn't do that. She was responding to the broader challenge about the merits of a CGT in New Zealand, and that's really what it's quite a robust debate about that.
For any All Blacks out.
Albanese came through Australia like a wrecking ball. And now, please, nobody create an AI image using Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball music video to depict Anthony Albanese in the nude on a wrecking ball. I remember channeling back to Fawkes' outrage that George Christensen was told off sharing a cartoon of depicting Anastasia Palaszczuk naked on a wrecking ball. That was actually when the song Wrecking Ball was the most, I don't think it was the #1 song, but the music video was. Now, New Zealand Labor opposition leader Chris Hipkins, who you remember was briefly the Prime Minister after Jacinta Ardern, decided to run away after when the New Zealand voters were about to come for her with baseball bats. So he remained as opposition leader, and he thinks a capital gains tax on residential investments and commercial properties of 28% is a great idea, and has promised to implement that if he wins the 2026 general election. At least he is taking it to an election, unlike Anthony Albanese, who I'm not sure if anyone saw him squirm when he was interviewed by Andrew Clenelg at the Australia's Economic Outlook Summit. He kept saying, "We've changed our position." It sounds like he's talking about the Kama Sutra positions there. I mean, he's been doing a lot of mental political gymnastics, trying to explain that he didn't break a promise, he didn't lie. Albo liar. So see if we can, we used to call Julie Gillard Jewel Liar, we can call him Alb Liar. And of course, Dave Hughes, as I played last week, is continuing to make videos criticising the Albanese government's budget, which they lied about, abolishing negative gearing for new homes, and as I mentioned, capital gains. Then there was the surprise about a testamentary discretionary trusts, which operate as a death tax. Now, we had on Sunday evening a news poll which confirmed what already the Red Bridge and YouGov polls had confirmed, that One Nation is the most popular party in Australia, though two-party preferred. Labor still scrapes over the line. And maybe this is why on Monday morning, on the King's birthday, Anthony Albanese pledged to reduce net overseas migration over the next couple of years, so by 2027-28. So he's pushed it out. And this is just a aim. They never hit their migration targets. So net overseas migration figure forecast in this year's budget for 2025-26 is 295,000. So he made this announcement in response to a journalist questions about Australia's population hitting 28 million. He refused to say that One Nation's rise is due to the Australians not liking his government's mass migration. And instead, it's said it's because of economic anxiety. Though Angus Taylor, who you would be forgiven for thinking that the Liberal Party thinks that they've turned the corner when they're actually in the same position in the polls that they were when Susan Ley was leader. And I couldn't believe Angus Taylor today. He blamed his poor poll numbers on the Albanese government's budget. So he's claiming that it's Albanese's fault our numbers are plummeting. And that's also how they tried to explain their loss in the Farrer by-election, is that, they are angry at the system. Well, I think a lot of Australians have really long memories. And, well, they remember that the mass migration, started under the Howard government and continued under the Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison governments. Tony Abbott, who's the new national president, he, of course, was a massive letdown as Prime Minister, but is now talking tough on migration, and changing the Sex Discrimination Act, even though he waved Julia Gillard's changes through. So a lot of Australians are thinking, why should we believe that you're going to be any different? And Angus Taylor just sticks to the talking points. And it's funny now that Tony Abbott and Angus Taylor, they want One Nation to agree to a preference deal. They're doing the ones begging now, yet they have the nerve to say, please don't come after our seats, go after Labor seats. Well, why don't you try and win some Labor seats as well? Why should you just be allowed to remain in your cushy, safe seats? And obviously, the mainstream media and the political class, they're saying that One Nation needs to have more scrutiny, and they thought that how many times have they predicted the beginning of the end for One Nation? And they claimed that One Nation had been found out because of Barnaby Joyce's train wreck interview on the Bolt Report, which he was asked if One Nation's policy banning foreigners from owning Australian homes included permanent residents. He said yes, but after consulting with One Nation colleagues, he came back on air and said that it wouldn't. Pauline Hanson clarified the next day and said that temporary visa holders and foreign citizens residing overseas would be given 2 years to sell their Australian residential properties. 2GB's Mark Levy kicked Sean Bell, the New South Wales One Nation senator, off air because he wasn't sure how it would be enforced. But the legislation is worded in a way it says foreign persons, which permanent residents are not classified as. But it was a bit rich of the coalition to attack One Nation for this initial confusion, which, like I said, the legislation is a bit confusing. And when they want to end welfare for permanent residents. And now I had to laugh at the ABC saying, oh, this will backfire in migrant electorates. Permanent residents can't vote. So how can there be a backlash if the people that this policy is targeted at can't vote? I just thought that yet again was another absurd statement. Now, it is bipartisan policy. Peter Dutton also took this to the federal election that foreigners as foreign persons are still allowed to buy new homes, vacant lots, and redevelopment projects, because apparently that adds to our housing stock. Even all the new apartment towers, which we're told this is going to be the solution to our housing crisis, they're all gobbled up by foreigners who hardly even live there.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, in the High Court last Thursday, the Chief Justice, Stephen Galla, dismissed White Australia's application for an injunction to the implementation of the prohibited hate group prescription, while the full High Court hears their challenge in September. Justice Galea, how do you say it? Gagalia, Gagala. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm always terrible at pronunciations. So he claims that White Australia's injunction to claim immunity from laws from the laws had the direct quote was that I'm losing my thing here. Got too many notes here. He said there were no compelling grounds to halt the application. So in the aftermath of the Bondi Islamic terrorist attack, the Albanese government, with the support of the coalition, passed the Combating Anti-Semitism, Hate Extremism legislation, which contained this prohibited hate group provision, where Tony Burke made White Australia and the National Socialist Network and European Australia a prohibited hate group, which makes it a criminal offence to direct, join, support, fund, recruit, or train members of the organisation with imprisonment of up to 15 years. Now, their barrister is Peter King, who, interestingly, is the former Liberal member for Wentworth until his pre-selection was lost by Malcolm Turnbull in 2004. White Australia are challenging on a constitutional grounds, burden the implied freedom of political communication, because they are applying with the Australian Electoral Commission to be a political party. So they submitted their application to the Australian Electoral Commission with 1788 members, but they had the names blacked out because of the laws. So the AEC has now rejected it. Now, the precedent is the banning of the Communist Party in 1951, legislation passed by the Menzies government. It was knocked out by the High Court. There was a referendum, and even though Australians were no fan of communists in 1951, the referendum failed. Now, it's worth looking at the Constitutional Clarion, the Professor Anne Toomey, constitutional law expert, who has said that these laws raise serious constitutional concerns because they allow the executive rather than a court to determine if an organisation should be banned. And we know that the High Court, they knocked out a minister being able to strip dual citizenship, saying only a court could do that. She's also said the legislation could become a dangerous weapon by a future authoritarian government to use. But Tony Burke claims because they have to consult the opposition, then there's checks and balances. Though, what if they wanted to ban one nation because there were extremists in the branches? And this is what Pauline Hanson said in her a Sydney Morning Herald Age podcast with Paul Sakal. She's going to be addressing the National Press Club for the first time in 30 years. So she is accepting invitations to go on mainstream media podcasts and go to the National Press Club, except the ABC and the Guardian, because they bragged about not manipulating, but choosing a photo of Pauline Hanson that made her look more sinister. So also on Thursday at the Melbourne Magistrates Court, Jacob Herjant, Nathan Bull, Michael Nelson and Ian Lomax were found guilty of behaving in an offensive manner over the booing of the Welcome to Country at the 2025 Anzac Day dawn service at the Shrine of Remembrance. So this wasn't this year, it was the year before. So Magistrate James Fitzgerald convicted Hershant and Nelson, convicted and fined them $1,900. So Bull and Lomax were fined $1,800 respectively and avoided a conviction. Up in Sydney last Wednesday, Eli Toby pleaded guilty to committing a nuisance in or on a war memorial for booing this year, the 2026 Welcome to Country at Sydney's Anzac Day dawn service. So he was fined $880 by Judge Greg Grogan at Sydney's Downing Centre local court, which is sort of the equivalent of their Melbourne Magistrates Court. So they call it the local court. In New South Wales, it's called the Magistrates. I'm not from New South Wales, so don't quote me on that. And there was also, after an ABC article / doxing, Boxing Victoria temporarily suspended the owner of Melbourne's club Titans after learning that Thomas Sewell had been training in the facility. So there's no evidence that he even shared Thomas Sewell's views, but literally guilt by association, which is like that's the worst. Like, it's arguably like I don't want to have a hierarchy, but it's even worse than what's been done to Lisa, because they didn't even do anything really.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, there is still white-hot anger in Britain about the murder of Henry Novak by Vikram Digwa, who falsely claimed that Henry had racially abused him, and the police handcuffed him as he lay dying, saying, "I've been stabbed, I can't breathe." And the callous male police officer said, "I don't think you have been, mate." Now, I use the term white hot anger deliberately. Now, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, in his emergency broadcast, called for people to respond with pure cold rage, though the BBC claimed he said a white cold outrage, and they had to issue a correction. Farage also posted to social media, "White Lives Matter too," which the Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch, who is Nigerian, well, she doesn't identify as a Nigerian, she identifies as a Yoruba person, a ethnic group in Nigeria. Even though she was born in Britain, she was basically an anchor baby, because when political situation deteriorated in Lagos when she was raised as a teenager, it allowed her to move to Britain. So she said, "I don't want to hear about Black Lives Matter. I don't want to hear about White Lives Matter. Everyone matters. Henry Novak matters. Remove identity politics from public life." Well, I think it's a bit late for that now. That's 10 years ago talking point. And why is it so difficult to say white lives matter or white lives matter as well? And of course, she can't relate to how Indigenous white Brits are feeling, because she is black. Her children are half black, will be visibly black. So they will never experience anti-white racism. And again, it's a bit rich. It's rich from her and her to just have these motherhood statements about we just need to remove identity politics. And she's criticized Nigel Farage for his inflammatory language. Kathy Newman, remember her, who got owned by Jordan Peterson many years ago. She's on Sky News UK, and she interviewed the Reform UK. What's his position now? He used to be the president, Zahir Yusuf. This is where Yusuf is useful as a brown Muslim to defend Nigel Farage. She was saying this is incitement. And then, of course, Kathy Newman, as she always does, plays the victim, and she released a video pointing out all of the sexist trolls threatening her. I mean, you seriously think after the backlash she copped online with her Jordan Peterson interview that she might have developed a thicker skin. I can't believe she was allowed to fail up and was promoted, poached from Channel 4 News to host a show on Sky News UK. Now, Kemi Badenoch, like when you're getting praise from Keir Starmer for your response to reaction to Henry Novak's murder, Keir Starmer hid behind this statement by Henry's father, Mark Novak. "We don't want his death to be used to create further division, hatred, tension. We want his story to make the streets safer for everyone." Though obviously that means that the guidance which tells police to treat the races differently, that needs to be abolished. Nigel Farage has, in my opinion, his response, his statements in the aftermath of Henry Novak's murder, they get a 10 out of 10 A+ for me. You could say that Rupert Lowe's Restore Party is rubbing off because obviously Nigel Farage wants to capture as many reform votes as possible and make us field by-election, not have Restore split the vote in the first past the post system, and allow an avenue for Andy Burnham to become the next Prime Minister. I saw another criticism of Nigel Farage, which Henry Novak, it's a Polish name. You wanted Brexit because you wanted less Poles in Britain. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the reason that the police believed Henry's murderer is because they automatically took, because of their manual guidance, that they took a accusation of racism more seriously than actually his cries for treatment. And obviously, and also Nigel Farage has said the riots, they won't end until there is actual change. The Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch, they say we just need to come together. And Keir Starmer, his position is that we need to let the independent investigation into the police officers' conduct continue. So the IOPC investigation. And the most prominent non-white in his government is Deputy David Lammy. He claimed that there's no two-tier policing, so agreeing with Keir Starmer, even though, of all places, the BBC, they showed the guidance in front of him, and because David Lammy's not very smart, he squirmed really badly.
That we've seen proof of what they call two-tier policing. And I want to show everyone the guidance that they've talked about to kind of prove that point that you've already referred to. This is a police chief's guidance. It says, our commitment to racial equity means producing equality of policing outcomes for people from different ethnic groups. Now, that's a bit of a word salad, but this is the really key phrase. It does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. Now, that sounds like it goes absolutely against the principle that you've said a couple of times this morning already, that we are all equal before the law.
Yeah, I'm really clear. We're all equal before the law.
So is that wrong, then, that guidance?
The complexity is equality does not always necessarily mean the same. And that's why I use the example of someone who's Jewish and what they eat. Or, for example, in the criminal justice, the most overrepresented group in the criminal justice system are Gypsy, Roma, Traveller. Now,
but is that appropriate? This is the question. One of your colleagues, Sarah Jones, the policing minister, says the language in that is wrong. It gives the wrong impression.
You said it's a bit of a word salad. It needs review, because in the end, officers have got to know, they've got to understand it, they've got to know what the primary goal is, and in the end, what the public want to see, whatever their colour, in reaction to Henry Novak, is good policing. And the questions are, did we see good policing? But as Kay has said, this is a complex unfolding situation. Let those who are charged to investigate properly investigate it, but understand that context can be different for different groups.
But I'm asking you really about the wider principles that this has raised here. Do you think that we do now have a situation, looking at guidance like that, where what your critics call two-tier policing is now sometimes something that happens?
No, I don't recognise two-tier policing across our country. I disagree with him. This has got nothing to do with mass migration. This young man was a Brit. Let's be clear about that. And I said, look, Mr. Vice President, you're wrong about this.
Yes, Vikram Adigwa was a Brit. Just simply because his criminal mother, who has been convicted of aiding in his murder by hiding the knife, she hovered her vagina over Britain to give birth to him and his brother, who made the fake phone call to the police that his brother had been racially attacked. Now, the Sikh lobby, which is extremely powerful in not just Britain, but also Canada and here in Australia, they have pushed back strongly against new calls to ban them carrying knives. This, of course, is what they call the Kirpan, and so they claim it's not a optional accessory. It's an article of faith. It's non-negotiable. Yet other Western countries, France and Germany, have banned it. If everyone's banned from carrying knives, so should you. And we saw in Australia back in 2021, there was a teenage Sikh in Sydney who allegedly 14-year-old who stabbed a 16-year-old boy twice in the stomach. Thankfully, he survived, but the Sikh lobby here were outraged that there was a temporary ban, and they successfully challenged a Queensland ban in the state Supreme Court, and they said it was inconsistent with the Racial Discrimination Act. So the Sikh lobby is like, they say that they're a peaceful religion, yet they need to carry knives to defend the faith. And this is what we've repeatedly heard over the past week, that Sikhism is a religion of peace, even though there are extremist, violent Khalistani cells in Western countries, the attempting to create a Sikh state in Punjabi. Remember the mini riot at Flinders Street Station in 2023 between the Sikhs and the Hindus. The Sikhs were holding their fake Khalistan independence referendum. You're supposed to be settling in the West countries, yet you're using this as a launch pad to have a separatist movement in India. And Canada's government was outraged that a Sikh leader was assassinated by the Indian government because they view Khalistani separatism as a national security issue. And of course, there was the assassination of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in 1984 by two of her Sikh bodyguards. So it can't. The religion of peace, that it's not you, that it's a violation to. We need to carry knives, but so we need it to defend our faith, but it's for peaceful, noble purposes. That's a bit of a contradiction there. And of course, the Sikh lobby now claim that they're the real victims. They've been verbally abused. Apparently, there was a Sikh family that was the victim of a racially attack in Birmingham. Well, we'll see about that, because we know that Vikram Digwa lied about that. They've begun to prosecute rioters in Southampton, claiming that they throw wheelie bins at police. I don't think so, mate. This is how we should just respond to these other accusations. I don't think so, mate. Look, we can have our own facts as well, using that horrible policeman's language against him. But now the Sikh lobby, because they're losing the argument, they now want a inquiry in to Vikram Digwa, because now they claim that they reported him to the local police because he stole knives from a Sikh temple, and the police took no action. And there was also footage of Digwa wielding a gun in 2022. holding the weapon while another person fired a wooden board. Now, guns aren't part of the Sikh religion either. Now, would this inquiry that now the Sikh lobby is looking at, will it investigate the Hampshire police who they wanted to release a statement immediately after Henry's murder to say that two men had been assaulted by an unknown man, basically, and it was objected to by his parents. He is saying that he was the aggressor. Then they wanted to release a statement during the trial to address so-called misinformation, but they were talked out of it by the Crown Prosecution Services. So they tried to do a cover-up initially, but because the evidence was so overwhelming, they took 5 days to charge Digwam with murder. So there are heaps of unresolved, and the reason why white Brits, if they be Indigenous or if they have a Polish heritage like Henry Novak, the reason why they are right to still be enraged is because that could very easily be them or their white sons. I mean, obviously, any father, Mark Novak, tries not to, as the Oasis song, look back in anger. But these crimes, they shake communities, because that could have been me. And as Dawn Browning has just alerted me to in the chat, there has been a attempted beheading in Belfast in Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. Thankfully, the beheading, this Somali man was not successful. How do we know he's Somali? He could be an Irishman, just like Axel Rudakabana was Welsh. So, yeah, he might be of Somali ethnicity, but he could be a Irishman or Brit. Obviously, I'm being very sarcastic here. Dawn says the cops may also have been ultimately responsible, meaning Digwa would be accessory after the fact. It's nuts. Well, they claim that, Henry was going to die anyway, which it would have been different if, what if he could have been saved? That is such a furphy, because what if he could have been saved? What if the police finished him off?
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, before we go, there was a brief reheating up of the Iran war, well, only by Israel, because, there was the Israel-Lebanon truce, which Hezbollah didn't agree to, so that means that Israel bombed southern Beirut, so they're moving up further up into Lebanon. So Iran responded, and as did Israel. And in a sign that Trump is basically done with Israel now, remember that phone call he had with Benjamin Netanyahu, calling him fucking crazy. Everyone hates Israel now. He called on Israel to not retaliate, which they did. So they just ignored Trump. And Trump, he's now trying to counter that he's Netanyahu's bitch. See, men can be the bitch of another politician. And so he said, "I'm in control. I tell him what to do." And, well, Trump, he's got to live with the consequences of allowing Netanyahu to talk him into this Iran war. It's going to tarnish his legacy. And was he talked into it or persuaded into it because of blackmail? If Netanyahu, if you don't do this, I'll release the tape of you doing that thing. Netanyahu is obviously will just do what he wants because he wants to remain prime minister. He's facing an election later this year. Naftali.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
Naftali Bennett, who was briefly prime minister, he is leading an anti-Netanyahu coalition, and he is actually more extreme when it comes to the Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and a Palestinian state. So I saw that the ABC, Patricia Carvella, saying that, because there's renewed missile exchanges, it could lead to fuel rationing. Well, the Strait of Hormuz is still shut, and I have to say that to all those people back in March and April who said to me, "Just you wait, this will be worse than COVID." Well, we're in June, and the petrol price is stable. Obviously, it'll go back up 32 cents at the end of the month with the excise cut ending. But we also had all of these so-called energy expert doomers, like the COVID experts, saying we're going to have rationing by April, May. Now we're going to have it by July, August. It's like the COVID people. Just you wait. Just you wait. I can't believe that there's so many. When people say "just you wait," they're hoping that sadistically that there'll be this a suffering, apocalyptic suffering for I don't know why. So yes, everyone, I told you so. That this wasn't going to be a petrol apocalypse. Petrol markets are much more resilient. And so this exchange of missiles, like I said, the Strait of Hormuz is still shut as it was before. And the UAE, who has left the OPEC cartel, are building another pipeline. So we're not going to just go off and this is what people claiming in April, that we're going to go off a cliff, a fuel cliff, when all the oil from the Strait of Hormuz, there was just going to be a day zero when there's going to be no more oil. It was absolutely absurd, and you all fell for mainstream media clickbait. Now, of course, at the end of the show, even though I just insulted many of you, it's if I wanted to have, I've never been the type of person to just go with a narrative to just attract followers, unlike some other people. That's why a lot of you watch me, and that's why many of you support me over at Substack. With a financial membership, and you can also support us over at theunshackled.net/membership. Now, as you would also be aware that, like Lisa Jane Spencer, I am a Reality Check Radio contributor. I've got my Wilms report with Paul Brennan, which was released today. They have also brought out a Australian version of their popular daily newsletter, weekday newsletter, biteme.news. So I'll put that in the chat there. So I think we are turning a cultural corner, where obviously Lisa has received massive support, and she could, I reckon, if she held a stand-up event, it would be a sellout. we've just seen people laughing and sharing their own witch memes about Jacinta, Allan. So I think that the culture comedy is healing quite a bit. So I've been a bit optimistic this week as well, and I think so should you as well. So thank you once again for watching. I will see you all again on the next WilmsFront Snapshot news program on the following Tuesday. Good night.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes, and keep visiting the Unshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.